Hi, welcome back to My Horror History, the podcast where we normally chat to people about their history through horror. This week, however, we have a special bonus episode, and yes, it's finally risen from the dead and blown off the cobwebs. My Horror History presents to you the best horror movies of 2025, although a little bit late to the party, but still looking fresh. I'll be sharing my personal top 5 horror films of the year, the ones that have haunted me, thrilled me, and just made me cackle in the dark. And I won't be wandering through these haunted halls alone. A few special guests will be joining me to reveal their favourite horror films of 2025 as well. So settle in, dim the lights, and let's resurrect the year in horror 2025. It's spooky, gory, and glory. In at my number 5, we have Weapons. I enjoyed Weapons, but it only just made it into my 5th position for a couple of reasons. But let me just start with what I really enjoyed about it the most. Weapons is a film that is like Pulp Fiction or Rashomon, where it takes the same character journey but looks at it from different perspectives. So we start the journey with a teacher and we continue it with a father. And those two stories I thought were really tense and intriguing and thrilling and nerve-wracking. There were times when in the cinema I had my nails dug into the armrests because I was so anxious about what was about to happen. And they had some really good jump scares, and the lighting and the whole tone of the piece for those first two stories was really creepy and atmospheric. Then the next 3 stories are taken from the perspective of a teacher or a head counsellor. Not entirely sure what they were meant to be. They might have even been the headmaster, a policeman, and a drug addict. And I could understand why all 3 stories were in there, because they tie up the story, any loose ends for the last act. But I just felt that they slowed the pace down, and they also started to shift the tone into something more comedic. Then we went to the final perspective, which was the little boy. And again, that started off creepy and atmospheric and then got a bit silly towards the end. And I didn't mind the silliness towards the end. That last scene is very, very amusing. But I think it just felt like his first film as well, where it was disjointed. And I know that he likes to see where a story would take him rather than plan out beginning, middle, of an end, or at least that's what I've been hearing. But for me, I think sometimes it makes for a film that's not quite cohesive, and I think I would have preferred, and though I enjoyed the ending, I would have preferred it to carry on in that very same creepy atmospheric style right to the very end. And I think that final scene with the children could have been absolutely terrifying instead of hysterical. Although I did enjoy that scene, I think I would have liked it to end on a creepier note rather than a funnier note. But it was still a very good film, and that's why it's at my number 5. At my number 4 is another very joyful experience, and that is The Monkey. The Monkey, I know that some people have a problem with because it's not what they expected, because it's not like the story, but having never read the story, it didn't disappoint me. I laughed all the way through. I enjoyed the stupid deaths, and me and my husband just had a really, really fun time watching that together. And so that's why The Monkey, and its wonderful performances and its wonderful deaths and its sense of humour, makes my number 4 best horror film of 2025.
Hi, I'm Sam Munster, and this is my top 5 horror movies of 2025. We were really spoiled. We had loads of really good movies, so this was tricky. But my top 5 are in this order, because I've managed to actually pin myself down and give myself an order. 1, Frankenstein. 2, Nosferatu, bit of a theme there for gothic horror. 3, Bring Her Back. 4, Sinners. And then 5, 28 Years Later.
Thanks to Sam for doing that. Right, and so on now to my number 3 pick for 2025, and that is Bring Her Back. I really like the Philippou brothers. I really, really enjoyed Talk to Me, for it was inventive and creepy, and they do young people so well. They don't make them a stupid stereotype, which I really enjoy, and that continues into Bring Her Back, which is a brilliant film. A brilliant young cast. Again, they're great at getting the best performances out of young people, and Sally Hawkes is brilliant as well. It's not a film that you enjoy. It's scary, it's disturbing, and it's traumatic. And it's about loss of a parent, loss of a child, and how we manoeuvre through grief, and how we can be taken advantage of by the people who are meant to be caring for us. The main villain of the piece is quite a nasty, horrible character, but because they're such clever writers, by the end you kind of see things from a different perspective as well when it comes to the villain. It's a very intelligent, thoughtful and disturbing film, and it's scary as well, and it's beautifully shot as well as beautifully acted. And I would recommend this to anybody, but only if you're in the right frame of mind to experience it, because it is a heartbreaking, disturbing movie. But it does seem to live in the same universe as Talk to Me, and I have a feeling at some point maybe they may all be connected. Right. Then on to my number 2 pick, and for a long time this was my number 1 pick of the year until I went back and did a rewatch of something else. And so my number 2 is 28 Years Later. Again, another film about grief, a grieving island getting over the loss of its population, getting over the fact that it's disconnected from the world around it that it used to be connected with, and getting over the loss of people close. But mainly it's a tale of growing up. It's a tale of a young boy, and how when we move from childhood into our teenage years, how we begin to see our parents for who they truly are, instead of the heroes that we put on the pedestals. And it's about a boy and his connection with his father, and a boy and his connection with his mother. That isn't to say for a minute that this isn't a scary movie, a frightening movie, or a tense movie, because it is. It's got some astonishing scenes in it that really have you on the edge of your seat, but it's also got emotion, and I personally want that from a zombie or an infected movie, because you're losing that person, and then they have the potential of coming back, but not as themselves. And that's a difficult thing to process, especially when you're going through the grief of losing them and the joy of them coming back, and then realising that they've not really come back to you. Not that it necessarily touches on that too much this time, but it has done in the past. And I just think that I knew that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland wouldn't let me down. I didn't think for a minute that they would return to the franchise if they didn't have something interesting, exciting to say. And as well as kind of talking about death, it seems to be talking about how we've got over COVID and coming through that and the loss of that. And for the British, I think it probably touches a nerve, because I think it's also talking about Brexit, and because it has us disconnected from the rest of the world, and then the island that the young boy lives on disconnected from the rest of the UK. And it's kind of about trying to preserve a past, and a past that was probably never really there. I think mainly the main reason it didn't make it to number 1 is because the ending is slightly jarring compared to the rest of the film, but that doesn't mean that I hated the ending. It just felt that if they just ended it with the child wandering, then that probably would have been better, and they could have then started the next film where they ended this film. But besides that, it's an astonishing, brilliant piece of art, and well worthy of my number 2.
Okay, hello Bev and Bev's listeners. I've recently been a guest on my horror history. I hope that went okay for you, Bev. But in the meantime, just want to give you my top 10 sort of thing of the past year. Films that I would definitely recommend. Some are quite obvious and some maybe are not. So this is a very fluid list. I just want to say that. Be aware. Things change all the time. I need at least a year before I settle on my actual, what I think will be a top 10. But at the moment, as it stands, I would say all these actually are 8 out of 10 or above. Going to begin with Predator, Killer of Killers, the animation Predator film that came out. An absolute modern classic. Place above that, I put the new Toxic Avenger film. I know, like, it was a 2023 sort of film festival favourite. Can't believe that this was almost never going to see the light of day like that Batgirl film. My favourite performance in it is actually as the homeless person, David Yao. Got to see the Toxic Avenger. I actually thought it would be as good as it is, so I'm glad it lived up to my expectations. Following that is a film called Dead Male. Saw that at Fright Fest a couple of years back. This one is about a kidnapping of sorts. It's got a lot of prog. It's got a lot of prog music in it. It's very strange. Above that, I placed a film called Heart Eyes. I think it may just be a slasher, but it's a brilliant slasher. And if you're the sort of person that thinks, it is just a slasher, but I love slashers, then this film will be for you. That's Heart Eyes. The Rule of Jenny Penn, I put above that. Also another one that played 2024 film festivals. But John Lithgow's performance in this is outstanding. If you're like me and you think to yourself, I don't really want to watch a film about people in an old people's home, what's that going to be like? Well, it's brilliant. Above that, I put Sinners. Even though it's at my number 5 position, I thought this one was incredibly overrated. People were saying that not only was it the greatest horror film of the year, but it was the best film of the year. As I say, it's number 5 on my list. I thought 4 were better, and those 4 are as follows. We've got The Long Walk, a Stephen King adaptation. The book I hadn't read, first of all, so I went into this blind, but having an idea of what it was about, because there was a lot of spoilers beforehand. The performances all round were fantastic. Myself and my wife left the cinema just absolutely gutted. So that's The Long Walk. And now the next 3, the top 3, they are all my number 1. I could not choose between them. I give them all 10 out of 10s. I think 2025 was an incredible year. I begin with Bring Her Back, which is a possession film of sorts. If you haven't seen that, make sure you do before the year's out. It is an incredible film. Absolutely devastating, completely depressing. But hey, it's Christmas. After that, I put Weapons. Loved Weapons, but who didn't love Weapons? It was a fantastic cinema experience for me. And a film I just rewatched yesterday because I wasn't sure if this does belong in the number 1 spot, but it really does. Begonia from Mr. Lanthimos. What a film. Again, incredible performances. Emma, Jesse, getting it together once again. And what would I say about it? I saw the Korean original on this. I can't remember what that was called right now, but I saw the Korean original and I quite liked it. Of course, Yorgos Lanthimos is going to make things completely different, but do not watch that original before this. Watch it after, because it will spoil where it goes in a roundabout way. I don't want to spoil anything here, but yeah. So just remember, my number 1s, Bring Her Back, Weapons, Begonia. Can't choose between them right now, but you know, that's just the top 10. That is an incredible year in horror. And I'm just going to run off like another, 12, 15 that I gave 7 out of 10 for. These were all my undercards, but I think they're just all fantastic. St. Clair, Haunted Mountains, The Yellow Taboo, that was very good. Frankenstein, Game, oh my goodness, Game, got to watch Game. Traumatica, an absolute severe film that split the audience completely at Fright Fest 2024. That came out. The Monkey, The Gorge. Nobody really loved that except me. The Gorge. Wow. The Gorge. Presence. The Ugly Stepsister. Together. and Companion. Okay, they're the runners-up. But yeah, that was my top 10. Bunch of runners-up. Bev, thanks for having me on. I hope you have a splendid new year and speak to you soon. Bye.
Thanks to Paul for giving me his top 10. That was really, really kind of him to do that. So, on to my special mentions for last year. There's a few films that I saw that didn't quite make it into my top 10, but I just wanted to give them a little shout out. And the first one is Dangerous Animals. A very fun take on the whole serial killer vibe, throwing in a bit of a shark, and the main villain's dancing scene was very, very enjoyable. So I thought that was a good one, and I'd recommend that to anybody who wants a good time. And talking of a good time, I would like to say Final Destination Bloodlines. Brilliant fun. Really good deaths. Just an enjoyable little romp and a really good addition to the franchise. So I really enjoyed that one. The next one is a nice little entry-level horror film called Dust Bunny, which I haven't heard many people mention, but it's got Mads Mikkelsen and Sigourney Weaver in, and it's really good, about a little girl who hires the hitman who lives across the hall from her to kill the monster under her bed that's killed her parents. Or has he? Is it just a piece of her imagination, or does it really exist? Watch it and you'll find out. Giving me kind of Gremlin vibes, that sort of thing, and it's just an enjoyable little entry-level horror film. Next is Frankenstein. I enjoyed Frankenstein. It didn't quite make it into my top 10 despite the fact that it looked absolutely stunningly beautiful and there was some fantastic acting in it. I think that maybe the doctor's stroke creator's story for me went on a little bit too long, and as much as I love Oscar Isaacs, I think he was kind of chewing the scenery a bit and overdoing it, and it kind of took me out of the film slightly. But I really enjoyed the monsters story. I liked that side of things, and I wish that had been a little bit longer and the creator story had been a bit shorter. But otherwise, a beautiful film, and I'm sure I'll go back to it and see lots more in it one day. And lastly, one of the most enjoyable experiences at the cinema this year for me was Toxic Avenger. I love the old Troma films, especially Toxic Avenger. It inspired me to go off to college and make my own films. And I just loved the fact that this film was made with such joy and such love for the original franchise. So, and also it was just such an enjoyable romp because it was a mystery horror screening at my local View cinema, and there were lots of people in there who knew nothing about Troma films, knew nothing about Toxic Avenger, and did not know what they were letting themselves in for. So much so that a couple even walked out. But that just made me laugh, because that's the whole point of Troma, is to offend slightly. But it was so much fun, and I especially liked the shot of the booze quickly followed by the shot of a penis, just to equal things out and make sure that everybody got something they enjoyed. So much fun. I loved that. I loved it. Almost got into my top 5, but Weapons is just so beautifully shot and lit that I couldn't justify putting Toxic in my top 5. Lastly, I would just like to talk about one of my favourite experiences of the past year, and that was going to the cinema to watch Jaws for the first time. Jaws, as you know, I think is a perfect movie. Not my favourite movie, but a perfect movie. And the characters and the writing and the acting in it are brilliant. And I've watched it so many times over the years. I thought I'd seen everything until I went to the cinema. And I kind of saw the mechanics of the film, which you don't necessarily want to see, but I wanted to kind of see how shots lined up, and I did for the first time. Things I hadn't noticed before, about transitions between shots and how the camera moved, and just the technical elements of it, which I hadn't noticed before. And also there was a really good anniversary documentary that came out, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. So that was a great weekend of watching the documentary and then going to see the film at the cinema for the first time. And my cinema is right on the beachfront in Painted as well. So it made the experience just that little bit better, being so close to the sea. And now it is my number one of the year. And like I said, for a long time, it was 28 years later, because that is a stunning movie and I did love it. But when I went back and watched my number one film again on my telly, I found a whole new level to it, which I hadn't experienced at the cinema. And it was a big experience at the cinema as well. So it was always going to be in my top 5, but just that extra viewing plumped it up to number 1, and that is Sinners. I know there's a lot that's been said about Sinners, but I just wanted to give my personal take on it, which may be different to a lot of other people's, but this is what the film made me feel and what I took from it. And that is that it's a film about stories and how we tell our stories and how we've told our stories throughout all our time, right back to our very, very, very distant ancestors. Whether it was dancing to the beat of the drum, to the fiddle, or to the strum of the guitar, we've always told our stories through music. And it's very important to us as a species. It's what separates us from the animals, is the way we can tell a story. So I took that from this film deeply, because there were some specific scenes, especially in the main music scene, where you're taken through generations of music, going right back to our distant ancestors and forward to the future, and how they're all connected, how we tell our stories that way. And I just thought that scene was amazing. And in the cinema, the whole soundtrack just enveloped me. And I don't think I've ever felt anything like that through music in the cinema before. I'm not a musicals fan, and this isn't strictly a musical. It's a film with some musical performances, because it's also about the performance and, setting up a gin joint and making it a fun place for people to be after a hard day working out in the cotton fields. It's got some amazing performances for sure, but it's not just performances or story or music. It's also what I noticed when I watched it on the small screen, which is a strange thing to pick up on the small screen, was the immense vastness of the landscape. The vistas are just shot absolutely beautifully. And I didn't really notice that at the cinema because I was so enveloped by the soundtrack and what that was doing. But it's just so beautifully shot and so beautifully lit. And I think the vastness makes the characters look small until you take them in to that space, into their space, to their gin joint, where they're singing their music and telling their stories, and they become bigger characters than what they seem out there in the fields. And I think that I thought that was just a stunning use of cinematography, and I really thought that just took my breath away. And it was strange that I didn't notice in the cinema, but like I say, the soundtrack is so amazing that it can completely take over what you're thinking at some points in the film. And for those who say that it's not a horror film, it is. It's got vampires in, it's got blood in, it's got guts in, it's got sex in, it's got all the normal things you expect from a vampire movie. And for those who say, oh, well, it's just Dusk Till Dawn, no, it isn't. You can have a vampire film and you can have people trapped in a club and it not be the same film. It would be like saying that every haunted house film is The Haunting when it isn't. Everything is a variation on a theme. There is no completely new stories, but this is a new take on vampires and what vampires mean, what they take from people, how they include people in their groups. It talks about it talks about cultural appropriation, and I can kind of see that with the vampires, but for me, what I took away more was that there are people out there who want to silence our stories and want to take away our music and take away our voices, and how important it is to fight that. But it's still fun, and it's still creepy, and it's still gory, so if you want a good vampire film, if you just want a bloody good film, then I suggest you watch Sinners, and that is my number one horror film of 2025. So, thank you very much for joining me on this episode. I really enjoyed doing this. And again, thank you to Sam and to Paul for recording their top films of 2025. I really, really appreciated that. Next month, I'll be joined by Tia from the Alien Effect podcast, and I hope you'll join me then. Thank you. Bye.